will take like another 3-4 minutes. So by that time, if you have any doubts, we can discuss. Else we'll discuss on the use case that I've provided to you guys. Okay. Let me open the use case. Let me share my screen. We'll discuss on the use case first, and then we'll start our session today. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, Ram.
Okay. So this application that we need to implement, this is completely based on a mobile application, where someone like us, say whoever has a shop. So the person is purchasing some mobile phone, and whatever mobiles are placed in order. So there is a warehouse, and which is being taken care by the warehouse manager. So the warehouse manager would check whether, uh, the enough mobiles are there or not, whatever order has been placed by the buyer, and based on that, the entire process has been implemented. Okay. So these are the different approval levels or teams that we have in this process. So the first team is the buyer team, who will place the order. Okay, so he would fill up some kind of application form, and through that application form, he will place the purchase order of mobiles. Now, here one thing, here the buyer is not like me or you. He is someone who owns a shop, so he will never purchase one mobile or two mobile. He will purchase mobiles in bulk. Okay, and the second level is the warehouse manager, where the warehouse manager would approve or reject the purchase order of the buyer. So warehouse manager can approve and reject both. Okay, so uh, from the warehouse manager's perspective, it is like if he finds enough mobiles in the warehouse, then only he will approve, else he will reject the purchase order. Now that I'm saying that that warehouse manager will check whether he has enough orders, enough mobiles or not in the warehouse. So don't think that we will be implementing any kind of database. Okay, so I'm just explaining the business logic behind this. So either warehouse manager can approve or he can reject. Last but not the least, we have the seller, and seller has only he can only approve a case. He doesn't have the rejection button. He cannot reject any flow. He can only approve a case. So post warehouse manager approves the workflow, the seller has to approve it again. Okay, so these are the different approval levels. Business object, whatever I've mentioned here, if you think you want to add more, you want to enhance the application by adding more parameters, and you want to implement some more functionality, definitely you can. From the UI part, you're most welcome. You can add more parameters, and you can add more add more features in the application form. So what we have here: name of the buyer, which needs to be filled up, address of the buyer, brand name, list of name value pair, and then we have quantity. Okay, so these four things must be there, but apart from this, if you feel like you want to add more, then definitely you can add more. Now I would explain the activities, exactly what needs to be done. So the first activity would be the buyer activity. So the buyer fills up an application form and selects which brand of mobile he or she wants to purchase. He or she fills up the form and selects the mobile brand and number of mobile phones he or she wants to purchase. And then finally, the buyer submits the application form. Okay. So buyer activity is a very simple one where he will fill up some application form and he has to select which brand. Now, here I have defined, if you see, I am using only one parameter called brand name, list of name value pair. If you want that, that you select say a brand, say iPhone, and then you have a second drop down which will show you only the only the iPhone models. Okay, and from there you again going to select. So which means some kind of dependency you can create between two drop downs. Like whenever you select the first brand, say you select Samsung, so in the second drop down the models of Samsung will come. Whenever you select iPhone in the first drop down, then the second drop down automatically the iPhone models will come. That way also you can implement. Okay, so I'm leaving this to you. If you think you can implement it, then definitely you can go. Okay, you can go for it. This is by buyer activity, the simple one. Next comes the warehouse activity. Now here, what it says, if buyer tries to purchase more than 5 mobiles, the case gets routed to the warehouse manager, which means that it is expected that that at least 5 mobiles will be there in the warehouse. So in case if there are more than 5 mobiles, then only the case will be routed to the warehouse manager. Okay. What is the second point? If buyer tries to purchase less than or equal to 5 mobiles, the case will be directly routed to seller for approval. So if the quantity is more than 5, then the case will go to warehouse manager. If the quantity is less than 5, then it will directly go to the seller for approval. Now here there are two scenarios. First scenario is the approval scenario and the second scenario is the rejection scenario. Okay. So the first one says, if the warehouse manager finds that if there are enough mobiles in the warehouse, he processes the application and marks it as approved. Now again, guys, we don't have any database right now. So the first statement which says if the warehouse manager finds that if there are enough mobiles in the warehouse, so this is kind of business logic. So it's not that we have implemented some kind of database where the warehouse manager can see, but this is approval scenario. Like if he clicks on approve, what will happen? Okay. So in case he approves, the buyer gets a task which displays, congratulations, you would receive your product in 5 to 6 working days. And buyer task will have an acknowledge button to close the task. Besides, seller also gets a task. Okay. So whenever the warehouse manager will approve, one task will be created for the buyer, which will say or display, congratulations, you would receive your product in 5 to 6 working days, and it will have an acknowledge button so that the task can be closed. And also there will be one more task created for the seller. Okay. Now if the warehouse manager finds that there are not enough mobiles in the warehouse, he or she would reject the application and the buyer gets a task which displays stock not available, please check back later. And the same task will again have an acknowledge button so that we can close it. Okay, so two scenarios. Approval scenario, we are creating two tasks, one for the buyer and one for the seller. And for the rejection scenario, we are just creating a task for the buyer and which will display stock not available, please check back later. Okay, so are we good with the warehouse activity? Any questions till now, guys?
I have a question, Rahul.
Yes.
So after buyer approves, sorry, warehouse manager approves. So one task will be acknowledgement for the
Hmm.
buyer.
Right.
Okay. Once he said okay, immediately the whole flow is closed, or because it also says seller also get a task. So both need to
Yeah,
acknowledge and then
both needs to be closed. Then only the entire workflow will be
okay.
completed.
So for seller, what will be there? He'll just approve, right? He has
We
only
are
one thing.
we will discuss about the seller activity in the next slide.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Both the scenarios are clear, right, guys? So we are good. Okay. Let's move to the next one. So now comes the seller activity. So here seller activity, like I said initially, that he can only approve a case. So it says seller will always approve the purchase. Seller finds the information submitted by the buyer in read-only mode and he or she will approve the purchase. Seller would get a parallel task with buyer only when warehouse manager marks the purchase of the buyer as approved. So for rejection scenarios, seller will never get a task because seller doesn't have a reject button in the UI. But in case if the warehouse manager is approving a case, then in that case seller would also get a parallel task with the buyer, and that would have all the details. So here I did not mention something. Even when the warehouse manager will see the task, will see all the details, that should also be in read-only mode. Okay. So post the buyer submitting the application form, whoever is seeing the application form details, everything will be in read-only mode. Okay. So are we good with the use case? Very simple use case. Okay. Anybody has any questions we can discuss, else I will check whether my server is up. Okay. Okay. So today we are going to start with events. Okay, so we are starting the next 50%. So events is definitely one of the most important thing uh, that is possibly there since the time when IBM BPM was evolved, and something which is nearly implemented in every project, in every process. Okay, so we'll today we are just going to discuss about the different components that can be used in events. Okay, and tomorrow onwards, tomorrow we'll see how to implement. So there are different components are there, a lot of components are there which we have to discuss, and tomorrow we are going to start the implementation. So the next 2 days we'll only do the implementations of the different types of events that we can have in IBM BPM. So what exactly is an event? So due to some action, an event can be triggered. Okay, so for example, there are two processes. Okay, process 1 and process 2. Process 1 wants to communicate with process 2. Okay, process 1 wants to send some information to process 2. So event is that component, or event is that mechanism through which I can send an information from one process to another process. Okay, and a lot of things are involved because it is not that simple that that sending a message from one process to another process can be done in several ways. We have a linked process activity, right? We discussed right at the beginning of our session. uh, Although we haven't seen the implementation of a linked process, we are definitely going to see it in this part of our IBM BPM sessions. So through a linked process also I can share information from one process to another, but using events also it can be done. So how it is done and what components we have to use, so all these components today we will discuss. Okay, while designing a process, what kind of events do we always use? So for example, if I open any process right now, say leave application process, so this process I can see that it has two events already, start event and end event, right? So this two events we are seeing from day one. Start event will start the process and end event will end the process. Okay, so some kind of action, which means whenever the token is say whenever it reaches the end event, it takes the action to complete the process. Okay, so there are different types of events are there, and mainly that we use in IBM BPM while designing a process is message events. Okay, message events are basically when I am trying to send one message from one process to another process. This kind of implementations will only be there in our application. Okay, sending a message from one process to another process, then receiving the message in the second process. These things we will do. Now, let us discuss about the different types of events. So, we have usually we have three different types of events: start event, intermediate event, and then we have end event. Okay. Start event, by the name start, you can understand that it is always right at the beginning of the process. End event is just at the end of the process, and intermediate event is somewhere in the middle of the process. Okay. Now there are different types of start event, there are different types of end event, there are different types of intermediate event. In start event, we have something called start message event. Okay, so in start event we have something called start message event, or I'll call it as SME. A start message event, if I enable a start message event in the beginning of my process, whenever some message will be, you know, will be delivered at this point in the start message event, the process will be triggered. Okay, so usually we have the different types of start event, we have different types of end event, and we have different types of intermediate event. So start message event is one of the start event types that we have, and whenever I implement this, what will happen, whenever some message will be delivered, that time the process will be triggered. Okay, so first we will discuss the different event types which has message related to it, guys. Okay, because message is something which is important in IBM BPM. Apart from that, there are others also which we don't use, like we have document events, start document event. Okay, um, we'll discuss about those also later on. But the most important things are any event which is related to message. Okay, because you will see that whenever you get the requirement, there will always be some dependency between two processes that you need to create, and that dependency can be created only with the help of events. Okay, what kind of dependency I'm talking about, we'll discuss about that also. We'll see some few scenarios. We'll discuss about the use case right at the end of our session today, and which I'm going to convert into a technical story. So through that you will be able to understand what exactly I'm talking about here. So start message event is where, if I enable a start message event at the right at the beginning in the start event, then whenever a message is delivered, only at that time the process will start. Now, what is this message that I'm talking about? What is a message here? Here, message doesn't mean a text. Here, message means some kind of information. And that information can be in the form of a simple data type, and it can also be a form of some complex object, which means process 1 and process 2, they wants to communicate between each other. So process 1 can send a single data to process 2, say for example employee location, that is a message, or it can also send an entire complex object, say for example employee information, the entire business information he can share through events between two processes. Okay, so this information we are calling as message. Okay, intermediate, there are other start events also. They are not important, so we'll discuss them later on. So we'll just, just an overview, we'll just go through them. And then we have intermediate event. Intermediate event, there are mainly two major types of intermediate event. One is intermediate sending message event, and then we have intermediate receiving message event. Okay. Yes, apart from this too, there are other types of intermediate events also, but we are first focusing on the message events, and then we'll discuss about them, because those things we don't implement much. These things we implement nearly in every application. So our prime focus will be anything related to message first. Okay. So intermediate sending message event and intermediate receiving message event. First of all, by the term intermediate, one thing you can understand that it is always placed in the middle of the process, in between my start and end events. Right? Now, intermediate events, intermediate message events are of two types. One is intermediate sending message event, and the other is intermediate receiving message event. Which means with this component, I can send an information from one process to another process, right? And with the help of this component, I can receive some information from another process. Okay. So the example that I was telling you, that one process is trying to send an information to another process. So the process one, which is trying to send an information, what kind of event I should configure? I should configure intermediate sending message event, because intermediate sending message event is used to send the message, right? And in the receiver process, where I would receive the message or information, I would implement intermediate receiving message event. Okay. Don't know whether you guys have heard of this term or not. People who are associated with IBM BPM for a very long time, they would definitely hear this term, a very common term called event listeners. You will see a lot of people talk about event listeners in the project. That have we implemented any event listener in our application in the process? What is an event listener? A component, an event component, which quietly listens whether there is an incoming message or not. Whenever it finds there is some incoming message, it activates itself, it receives the message, and then it moves forward. Okay, that's called an event listener, who listens to an event. Okay, who's trying to listen to an event. Whenever that event is reached, whenever the message is delivered, then only it becomes active and it moves forward. So here we have discussed about two event listeners already. What are they? Actually, there are two event listeners in IBM BPM, not more than two. One is start message event. Why this is considered as an event listener? Because I said you, start message event will be placed right at the beginning of the process, and it will wait for some message to be delivered. Whenever some message delivered at the start message event, it will trigger the process. So this is considered as an event listener. What is the other one? Intermediate receiving message event. It will also receive the message. So whoever receives the message is considered as an event listener. Okay. So we have start message event and intermediate receiving message event. These two events are considered as the event listeners. Okay. Apart from this intermediate events, we also have few more, which we'll discuss again in our going back to our designer. But first, we'll discuss about this thing, and then we'll go back and see what other things we have. Okay. Next, we have end event. End event can also be configured as end message event. Okay. So end message event, what it will do? It is used to send the message. Okay. So I want to send the message from process one to process two. If you don't want to implement intermediate sending message event to send a message, you can also implement end message event to send the message. Okay. Usually we always go for intermediate sending message event, but in case if you have a requirement where you need to send the message right at the end of the process, then in that case you can definitely use end message event. Okay. Whatever implementation we are going to do in the next 2 days, we are going to use this message events. Okay. Like I said, message is the most important thing in IBM BPM. So that is the reason we'll focus on this 3 4 event types that we have. Okay. Now let's go back to designer, and we'll see what other event types we have. Now I discussed about only one type of start event. Okay. There are other types of start event also. Okay. We discussed only about two intermediate events, but there are other types of intermediate events also. We have discussed only about one end event, but there are other types of end event also. Okay. Let's discuss. Okay. Before we move on, this part is clear. Anybody has any questions or queries?
One question, Rahul. Are we also covering that undercover agents here?
Definitely.
Okay, cool.
Step by step. Step by
Okay,
step. Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
First, we'll understand the event components, then we'll come to undercover agent. What is undercover agent and everything we discussed then. Without undercover agent, I cannot explain you the event. That is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
most important thing. Without that, I cannot implement whatever I'm discussing. That that one process will send some information to another process. This is done mainly by the undercover agent. Okay. Any other queries, guys? Any questions related to these components? Today is just the overview. We are not going to implement anything. So mostly theoretical things we'll discuss, how this can be implemented, or which kind of scenario can happen. Okay, and definitely by the end of our session we'll discuss about a technical story which we'll implement tomorrow. Okay, so I believe we are good. Let's go back to designer. Okay, so now we'll discuss about the different event types for both start and end, and as well as my intermediate event. So like you can see, we have the start event. So this is a normal start event, guys. Okay, this is a start event. Are different types of start events are there. One we already discussed, that is start message event. But before that, there is one more which is a normal one, which we call as non-start event. Okay, so how to see how many start events we have? Select the start event. The properties will be visible below for the start event. Come to the implementation. Here you see start event type. There is a drop down. So there's many different types of start events we have. Okay, the first one says none, which is the normal start event that we always implement in the process, which will allow you to start the process. Okay, this has no relation with your uh, different. This has no relation with any message. This is a normal start event. If you implement it, you can trigger the process from anywhere you want. Okay, next is message. We already discussed about this start message event. Okay, so whenever some message is delivered, then only it will trigger the process. Otherwise, you cannot trigger the process manually. Only when a message is delivered, then only the process will be triggered. Okay, next we have SCA service. What is SCA service? SCA service is a part of integration designer, and it is used to integrate multiple systems together. Okay, and what is the work of a SCA service in IID? In integration designer, SCA service is used to transform an object of an application into another object of a different application. Very simple. I am a Bengali. Today, suddenly, if I go to Bangalore, I will not understand what they're saying. Their native language, I will not understand, right? So I have to carry someone with me, or there should be someone who will be a mediator. Whenever I speak in Bengali, he will convert my language into their language so that they can understand. And whenever they will speak, they will convert that person will convert that language into a Bengali language so that I can understand, right? So the middle person is nothing but a SCA service. If I take this to a technical way, then when two applications they interact with each other, obviously it is not mandate that IBM BPM will understand the Java object, and it is not mandate that Java will understand IBM BPM business object, right? So there will be someone in the middle who would convert the business object of IBM BPM into a Java object and vice versa. That is called my SCA service. So if you have any integrations with IID, if IBM BPM has any integration with IID, and that is maybe through IID we have integrated some other application, then in that case, if you're using some kind of SCA service in IID, so I can implement start SCA service event. What will happen in that case? Whenever some information from an external application is delivered through a SCA service at the start SCA service event, it will trigger the process. Okay. If you ask me, do we really use it? No, we don't use it. We don't want to make our process more complex, especially that you start a process whenever some external application is is sending or whenever you're receiving some data from an external application at the start event. This way we have not implemented anything till now, and the reason being again the same thing, that BPM is not made for making too many calls from the process. Okay, too many external calls to be more precise. So I should design my process in a way that yes, I can implement this, that some information will come from an external application, and then from that service I will trigger my process. But directly adding a start ska service event, you are actually making a big dependency between your process and that external application. So in case the external application delivers the information directly on the start ska service event, then only your process will be triggered. So just think, if there is some kind of connection issue or some kind of server issue, my process will never be triggered. Okay, so there are other ways through which we can integrate our application with another application using IID, that we have something called external implementation. So usually we use that. If I have to integrate my application with some external application through IID, I would go for an external implementation rather than using a start SCA service. Okay, so it has some cons are there for which we don't use, and usually we don't get such requirements also. I mean, this kind of requirement is very is out of 100 times once it will come. I have never seen this kind of requirement, and I have never seen any of my seniors also discussing about this requirement. Anyways, next we have the two document events. So ECM means Enterprise Content Management. ECM content and document both can be implemented at the start event. Okay, both are related to document. Yes, you can implement document management system in IBM BPM, but there are other ways. This again will create a dependency right at the start event, which means whenever some document property is delivered at the start event, then only I will trigger my process. Otherwise, I cannot trigger my process. Now, what is this document property? Document property is basically, say you have configured FileNet. Okay, FileNet is a document repository. So say I have configured FileNet, and whenever some document is uploaded in FileNet, what happens usually? There are several properties for a document. Okay, for example, document ID is there. Whenever you upload a document, an identifier for the document is created. We call it as document ID. Then we have document title. What is the title of the document? Then uploaded time, like when the document was uploaded by, who has uploaded the document. So these are all the different properties of a document. And yes, one more important property is, whenever you upload a document to any BPM, any document repository, it can be FileNet, it can be some other document repository. What usually happens, we actually don't store the document directly over there. What happens actually, the document gets converted into base 64 data. Okay, so that's basically my document metadata. That is also a document property. Okay, so any kind of document property, whenever it is delivered at any of this start events, ECM content or document, the process will be triggered. Okay, so we have a toolkit in IBM BPM called content management. In future, if you want to, if you want to work on any document management system, definitely you can use that content management uh, toolkit to implement anything, not only uploading a document, but there are out of the box services through which you can view a document. Very simple. I mean, I have worked in document in one of my project. Unfortunately, I don't have that. I need to have a proper infrastructure to show you guys how a document system works. But you need to have a licensed product for that. You need to have a licensed filenet for that. So it's very simple. So in the toolkit, everything is available. If you want to view a document, what we usually do for any document management system, first we need to configure a server. Okay, so all the server information will be provided to you by the filenet team. So you see here there is somewhere you can add a server over here, and after you add a server like this, say for example you see new server configuration. On the right hand side you see this is the name of the server that is by default added, and then you have the different server types, and the first one itself is Enterprise Content Management Server. So say you are integrating your BPM application with some FileNet application, with some external application which will where you will store the documents, then you need to create a server over here. Okay, and all the server details will be provided to us by the external team, by the filenet team. Okay, what kind of details you see below: host name, port number, context path, repository, everything. If it is again protected, again it will have some user id password. Usually it is protected. FileNet, usually it is always protected. So whichever application wants to upload some document or get some document, we have to go through some authentication. Okay, so that authentication, that user id and password, we need to configure over here. After you configure the server, then you now go and you can, in the service layer or in the process layer, you can implement the different type of document components. Okay, so in that way you can implement it. So if you want, we will discuss on this later on. So I have few documents on the DMS, that is document management system of IBM. So if you want, I can share it. You can have a look on it. Okay. So this many start event types are there, but whatever start events we discussed, there is one problem with everything. That is, for example, like we discussed about start message event. Now the problem with this component is you cannot trigger this process without a message. Okay, if I'm implementing a start message event in my start event, I can never manually trigger this process. I cannot use any APIs to trigger this process. Only when a message is delivered, then only the process will be triggered. So it is clear that somehow if I implement a start message event or any of these event types, okay, there is always a dependency with some information coming from some external application. Okay, if I implement a start message event, there is always a dependency on the message coming from some other process. Okay, so I am somewhere creating a dependency for the initiation of the process, and I am associating that with either some other process or with some external application. Okay, so this is somewhat problematic, because if I have to test this process, every time I have to trigger this process from another process. I can never trigger this process directly. Okay, that is a problem, and that is the reason why we have intermediate events. If you're implementing intermediate events, then the initiation of the process there will never be a dependency like that. Okay, so we can definitely test our process multiple times without processing any information from some other process or some external application. Okay, so if you configure anything in the start event, always remember that you cannot trigger the process normally. Only when some information is being sent here, then only the process can be triggered automatically. Otherwise we'll not be able to trigger it. Okay, understood? Any questions on start events? Okay, next we have intermediate events. Okay, so how intermediate events can be implemented? Right on the right hand side palette, you have this one intermediate event. You can see the third last component. So if I drag it over here, so it becomes an intermediate message event. But let's see what are the other types of intermediate events. So here we have the different types of intermediate events. First one and second one we have already discussed: intermediate receiving message event and intermediate sending message event. Okay, so we already know what this two means. So we'll move to the next one: SCA service. Again, the same thing. Only the difference is we discussed about start SCA service event, which means I will receive some information from some external application through a SCA service right at the beginning of the process. The same information, if I want to receive in the middle of the process, that time I will implement intermediate SCA service event. Okay, just that the point is changing, the location is changing. If you implement start SCA service event, you will receive the information right at the beginning of the process. If you implement intermediate SCA service event, you will receive the information in the middle of the process. Same goes for your start message event and intermediate receiving message event. In the start message event, I used to receive the information right at the beginning of the process. In the intermediate receiving message event, we receive the information right in the middle of the process. Okay, that is my intermediate receiving message event. ECM content, same thing. If I receive some document properties, any information related to document in the middle of the process, then that is implemented using intermediate ECM content event. Okay, intermediate, you can understand something in the middle of the process between the start and the end event. Anything is your intermediate, so you can implement an intermediate event even after the start event. There also you can implement it, and you can also implement it before the end event. There also you can implement it. Okay, how to implement, how to configure, we'll see everything. Okay, that time we'll see how to configure these things. Next is timer. Very important. One of the most important components these days that we implement in every activity. Okay, timer. I can give a business scenario of a timer. So whenever we implement a process, we add the timer on top of every activity, right? So we have a due date. Say for example, whenever the process is triggered, the due date of the process say for example is 30 days. Now in the timer, I have added another 30 days. What will happen? Total due date is now 60 days, right? Now after the first 30 days is reached, this timer will become active. Okay, what it will wait for another 30 days, and when after 30 days it is reached, what will happen? From the timer, I have connected a sequence flow to the to a script where I've written a code to auto complete that task, which means if somebody is not completing his task within 6 days, within 60 days, then I'm auto completing that task. Okay, so this way I can implement a timer on top of every activity. Usually this kind of implementation comes in a project where you have an additional SLA to implement, and that additional SLA we implement it through a timer. Okay, so we will see implementations on this timer in our sessions. Tracking is deprecated. The reason being, first of all, what is tracking? Tracking is whenever we are implementing a process and whenever we are running the process, what happens? There are few performance metrics are there. Okay, so performance metrics, for example, I will just give you one scenario. Say I have designed a banking project. Okay, a banking process, say a credit card application process. Now I want to find out, say I am from the business. Okay, now I want to see in the last 1 year how much business I have done. Okay, how many applications have been submitted, how many have been completed on time, how many are not completed on time, how many are in progress. Okay, so by seeing all this information, what it is helping, how it is helping is how these informations are helping me. Basically, by seeing this, I can understand the efficiency of my organization. I can understand and I can decide, do I need to create some policies so that I can get more turnover, I can get more profit. If I see that in the last 1 year only 20 applications have been submitted for credit card, then somewhere I'm going wrong, somewhere my business is going wrong, right? If I see a lot of applications are coming in the last 1 year, now also I'm seeing it is increasing, then definitely it is very much helpful for me, and I would definitely go for certain policies which would give me more turnover rate, and which would not cause any delay for these loan applications to be passed. Now, where can we see all these things? Whatever I said, we have a component called process portal. Inside process portal, we have something called process performance report. Okay, it's a kind of audit report that is created by default. Okay, we don't customize it. It is something which is created by default. Yeah, we need to enable it. We definitely need to enable that report so that I can view that report for my process. Okay, now all this information, whatever I was talking about, the small metrics that I'm talking about, performance metrics, like in the last 1 year, how many applications are submitted. Now I am talking in terms of business. If I talk in terms of a BPM developer, in the last 1 year, how many times my process has been triggered. Okay, how many times I can see that all the tasks in my process are completed on time, how many applications or how many instances are still in progress. All these are my performance metrics. Whenever you install IBM BPM, a database also gets installed at the backend. We call the database as Performance Data Warehouse DB. Okay, one we have BPM DB, that is a product DB, and then we also have something called PDWDB or Performance Data Warehouse DB. Okay, whenever you create a process, okay, whenever we are designing a process, automatically what happens? Some tracking gets enabled by default. So all these performance metrics related to your process, they get saved in the database, in the PDWDB. And whenever you want to, get some report, then what you can do, you can log into the process portal and you can see those reports. Like, you have process performance, you also have something called team performance. Okay, like say there is a team of 5 members. Now I am from the business, I want to see how these 5 members are performing. Okay, I can see, say there are, say 3 members are there, say Pasha, Anup and Jay. Now from my team performance report, I can check that whether these 3 members in the team, they are working properly or not. How many tasks have been assigned to Jay, how many have been assigned to Anup, how many have been assigned to Pasha. Are they completing all the tasks on time? Everything I can track it from the team performance report. Okay. So just think from the business perspective how important this is. I can even do my appraisals from here. I can see who is working more, who is taking a lot of time to complete their tasks, right? All these things can be tracked from process portals, performance reports. And from where these performance reports are generating, they are generating from the performance indicators which are being added every time whenever you're triggering a process, whenever you're claiming a task. Automatically those things are getting added. And where it is getting added? Performance data warehouse DB. And from those information which are getting added in PWDB, with those we can see multiple reports in process portal. Okay, in the form of bar chart, in the form of pie chart, all these things are available over there. Okay, so we'll have a session that time, we'll discuss about this tracking more, and I'll also show you the reports and how to expose a process over there so that you can see the reports. All these things we'll discuss. Okay, so tracking, initially it was an event which we had to add in the middle of the process, so that any information, any performance related information gets added automatically to the PWTB. But nowadays we don't have to, because already this feature is available in other way, and that is always enabled whenever you create a process. That enable auto tracking is always enabled. So this feature is now deprecated. They have removed this feature. We don't have to add this feature anymore in the middle of the process. Okay, so mainly we have this different intermediate events. And to be very honest, in a process, in a business process, we use intermediate receiving message events or sending message events, or and timer. Scar service is same content we don't use, because both will create some kind of dependency with some external application. And this three, message receiving, message sending and timer, this we implement only when we, whenever we want to make our process in a way that yes, it is dependent, but it is dependent with some other artifact inside my process application. Okay, so usually we implement events only when the communication is happening between two processes within the process application. We don't implement it that some external application will pass some information to us and we will receive that data using event. No, we never do it. You will see, you can go and see multiple projects are there. Nowhere do we implement events in that case. What do we implement in that case? We have service flows for that. We have different types of services are there. REST integrations are there, Java integrations are there. Okay, so in case if I want to integrate my application with another application, I would not use events, I would go for my service flows, right? So this is all about my intermediate event. Any questions on the intermediate event, guys? Are we going too fast? Please let me know if you're going too fast. I'll slow down.
I'm good, Rahul.
Okay. Okay then. Then we'll move to the end event. Okay. Like we have the different types of start events, like we have different types of intermediate events. Similarly, we have different types of end events. The first one is a normal one which we always implement in a process, that whenever the token will reach at the nonce end event, it will complete the process. That's a normal, the simplest one. The other one is end message event, exactly what we discussed few minutes back, that whenever the token will reach at the end message event is responsible to send a message from one process to another process. Okay, so for sending a message, we learn two things. One is intermediate sending message event, that is used to send a message, and the other is end message event, that is also used to send a message. Which one is used more? Intermediate sending message event is used more. Okay. The thing is that why we use more, because as a developer, what I felt, because that will add more complexity in the process, and people like complexities actually. So I could have made everything very simple by implementing end message event to send a message and start message event to receive a message. But people like to use intermediate sending message events and intermediate receiving message events. And whenever you implement these two things in two processes, somewhat your process becomes more complex, and that is when a lot of mechanisms will come into place. Okay. You must have heard of, if people have ever worked in IBM BPM for even like 5 6 months, you must have heard of these terms: consume message, durable subscription. Okay, a lot of questions comes in the interview from here, and even in the certifications also, a lot of questions come from events. So intermediate sending and intermediate receiving are the most important event components that we have. Okay, and any, you will see, if you are seeing any project, you will see there will be always two process which will always communicate with each other using this intermediate sending and receiving message events. Okay, because that adds up, that gives you basically, you can add more mechanisms over there if you're using both intermediate events in both the process. Whereas start using a start message event, I already said this, that you are somewhat creating a dependency, that my process can be triggered only when some message is delivered. Otherwise, I can never trigger my process manually. That's a big problem. So if you have to remove those dependencies, then you have to add these things: intermediate sending and intermediate receiving message event. Okay. So coming back to end message event, it is used to send a message. Next is end error event. Okay, or error end event. So error end event is usually implemented whenever there is some kind of error you have caught in the process, and through the error end event, what we do, we throw that particular error. Okay, I can create multiple error codes. I can create multiple error messages, which I can capture whenever some kind of error occurs in my process, be it in any activity, employee or manager. So I want to catch that error, and after I catch that error, what I will do, I will throw that error. Okay, and through what component I can throw it? I can throw it using error end event. So we'll have a session on exception handling. That time I'll show you this component. I believe we missed one component in the intermediate event. Why it is not there? Okay, it is not there because for that you need to drag an intermediate event on top of an activity. Okay, now this is one another type of intermediate event, guys. So this is not there in the drop down. So since I was discussing about this exception handling thing, so it came into my mind. There is one more type of intermediate event. We call it as the error intermediate event or the error boundary event. Okay. Now, whenever you connect this error intermediate event on top of any activity, be it a user task or a system task, what will happen? In case if any error occurs in any of these activities, automatically this error intermediate event will capture that error or will catch that error. Okay, so error intermediate event is used to catch the error, and error end event is used to throw the error. Okay, so you don't have to configure literally anything if you're adding an error intermediate event. Whenever you add it, what we do, so from this error intermediate event, say I drag an error end event. So from this, say I connect, sorry. Okay, so from this I can connect this error end event. Now what will happen in this case? This is a happy path. Like if the manager is able to complete the task, is able to take an action to the task, then it will move to the end event. But in case if there is any error that comes in the manager task, be it some kind of data issue or some kind of syntax issue is there with the code, or maybe I'm calling some external interface from the manager task to get some details, and anywhere it fails, this error intermediate event or error boundary event, it will capture that error or catch the error, and automatically as the sequence flow will move from here to this error end event. And what will happen? The instance will fail, but yes, I will be able to understand what kind of error has come. Okay, because I am populating the error somewhere in some variable, and that variable, the value of the variable will give me the error information that has occurred on my manager task. Okay, this way we implement on top of every activity. Okay, we'll discuss this later on. We will have exception handling session. That time I'll explain how to implement exception handling in both the process layer and also in the service layer. Okay, so yeah, we were in the end events, different types of end events. So error end event is one of the important implementations. If you're implementing exception handling on the process layer, then error end event is important. Finally, we have something called time terminate. Whenever the token will reach this terminate end event, what will happen? The instance will be terminated. As simple as that. Okay, so in case if you have a business requirement, like say in some scenario, you want to terminate the instance, then I can implement this end terminate event. Okay, so there is one thing which I will say here, that is, in a process I can implement only one start event, but I can implement multiple end events in the process. Okay, so anytime anyone asks you, so always say we can implement only one type of start event. Basically I can start the process only in one way. Either I can do it using the normal start event that we are using here, or we can use some start message event. In that case I have to get some message to start the process, or I can implement a start SCA service event if I'm getting some information from some external application through IID SCA service. Then in that case I will use that, right? So only one start event can be implemented so that the process can be triggered. But I can actually implement multiple end events. This end event will end my process. Just now I showed you how to use an error end event that also can be implemented in a process. Okay, we have terminate event. Under certain condition, I might have to add the end terminate event in my process along with my normal end event. So which means I can have multiple end events, but only one start event I can implement. Okay. Any questions on any of these event types we discussed? Are we good?
Yeah, Rahul.
Yeah, Rahul, we are good.
Okay. I always tell that that events are the most complex topics. Knowing the fact, I can assure you of one thing: nobody can explain events better than me. At least I am sure of this because nobody even explained this thing with to me also in this way. So the story that I will explain you, this will possibly clear every doubt of yours. Okay. So I am going to talk about a non-technical story, which I am going to convert into a technical story. And whenever I'll convert it into technical story, you will understand the components very well. And whatever we are discussing right now, we'll be implementing the same tomorrow. Okay. And yes, before implementing the same tomorrow, we'll discuss about one more component tomorrow, which we'll not discuss today. That is undercover agent. Okay. So we'll also understand what is an undercover agent today. And tomorrow we'll see the configuration of an undercover agent, like how an undercover agent can be created, how we can implement it, because that is the most important thing across all the events whatever we have discussed in now. UCA or undercover agents are the most important thing. Okay. Now, say we have three people here, right? We have Jay, and say we have Anup. So Jay wants to communicate with Anup. Now the problem is Jay doesn't have a phone, neither Anup has a phone. They don't have any emails, so they cannot send out any emails. And there is some work for both, so that they also cannot come out of their house. Okay. But still they wants to communicate between each other. There's some sort of communication has to happen. Now since they cannot communicate directly, so there is someone in the middle who will come and help them. Who is that? Pasha. What will Pasha do? He will go to Jay's house. He will get the information from Jay. Then he will come to Anup's place and he will deliver the information. Now, this delivering of information can be done in two ways. One, Jay has said Pasha that you come to my place on every Sunday at 7 a.m. Whatever information I have, whatever I need to share with Anu, I will give it to you. Then you deliver it to him. So Pasha every Sunday at 7 a.m. he goes to Jay's place. He takes all the messages and he comes to Anu's place and delivers those messages. There is one way. And what is the other way? The other way is whenever Jay has a message, whenever, it can be at any point of time in the day. Whenever he has a message to deliver, Pasha will always become active. He will come to Jay's place, get the message, and will deliver it to Anu. So two ways are there. Okay. Now, Pasha, again, now this, whatever I spoke about till now is, based on uh, the way the information is getting shared between Jay and Noop. Okay, so Jay also can wonder, I want to share all the information in a bulk, or Jay can also wonder, I share the information only once. Whenever some message is there, I will call Pasha. He will come to my place and he will take the information and send it to Anup. Now, in terms of Pasha, okay, whenever he picks up a message from Jay, he can either deliver that message one by one to Anup, or he can deliver all the messages at one go. Okay. So whenever he picks up the message from Jay, he's keeping the message in a bag. Okay. So there are 10 messages which he has picked up from Jay. Now he can deliver the message from his bag either one by one, or he can deliver everything at a time. Okay. Understood this non-technical story? Are we good? A very simple one.
Yes, Rahul.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now let me convert this into a technical one. Jay is process one, and Anup is process two. Process one wants to communicate with process two, and somehow they are not able to communicate between each other until and unless I bring in a UCA, undercover agent. So what this undercover agent will do? There are two types of undercover agent. One is time elapsed UCA, and the other is event based UCA. What is time elapsed UCA? Whenever process one has said this UCA that on every Sunday at 7 a.m. please be active. Whatever messages I have, pick up those messages and deliver it to process two. That's my UCA, which we call as a time elapsed UCA, where I can schedule some time. I have a scheduler over there. I can schedule the time. Okay. So on every Sunday at 7 a.m., this UCA will become active. It will check whether it has any message to receive from anyone. Whenever it receives the message, it will make sure that it delivers the message at that time only. Okay, that's my time elapsed UCA. And the other is event based UCA or on event UCA. Whenever there is a message, there is no, it's not specific on any time. Whenever there is a message, the UCA will be active. It will pick up the message from process 1 and will deliver it to process 2. That's my event based UCA. Now, what is this bag? This bag is nothing but it's a queue. So every UCA has a queue. Okay, and there are two types of queue: asynchronous queue and synchronous queue. If the UCA is configured with an asynchronous queue, what will happen? Whatever messages it has, say it has got 100 messages in the queue, it will deliver all the messages at one go. If I am using a synchronous queue for a UCA, then the message will be delivered one at a time. Okay, this is all about events, and that is what we are going to implement in the next 2 days. If you are able to implement these things, whatever we discussed, then event is done. It will be completed. Any questions on any of the terms? Because from tomorrow onwards, yes, definitely I will show you how to create a UCA first. So tomorrow, the first thing we'll learn is how to create a UCA, both time-based as well as my event-based. Both we'll see tomorrow, and then we'll start this implementation. Exactly what we discussed today. Like process 1 will be there, process 2 will be there, and once we'll implement using start message event, and again we'll implement the same using intermediate sending message event. Okay. Any questions, guys, on this?
No, Rahul.
Okay.
Rahul, actually, one question. So, quick
Yes.
thing. So, in the intermediate message event, so we cannot add intermediate message event to start of the process, right? If the process is starting, right? Okay.
Hmm.
And okay.
Intermediate means middle, which will always be placed between start and end event. Okay.
So let's say if there are two BPDs, two processes actually, and we are calling the second process after the first process is triggered, can we have the intermediate message even?
Yes.
Okay, makes sense.
I should have the intermediate message event only in
Yeah.
process 1. Okay. If we are good, then we can close the session. Or if you have any technical queries, any question answered, you want to discuss anything about PPM, whatever we discussed till now, we can discuss. Else, we can close the session. We'll connect back tomorrow again for the next implementations.
Rahul, I have
Yes.
one query not related to the content.
Hmm.
About certification, do we get the dumps?
Yes, I will provide you the dumps for 8.6. I don't have the BW dumps with me,
Okay.
but I have the 8.6 dumps.
Okay.
So at least you can have an understanding of the questions, like how the questions come.
Yeah, please. Yes.
Else, you can get the dump in many places. Actually, there are many websites where they provide dumps, but you have to pay for that.
Okay. Okay. So that will be better if you provide us that 8.6 also. We can get just an idea.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes. But I will give it at the end of all the sessions.
Yeah. Sure. 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 No problem. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, then, guys, if you don't have any questions, we can disconnect. We will connect back tomorrow again at 8 a.m.
Okay, thank you, Rahul.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
You too. Yeah. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. All right.